Krisann Baxter. Krisann Baxter was a 16-year-old girl and a student at Joseph Jantz High School. In April of 1978, she ran away from home. Unfortunately, she would not be found alive. On October 4, 1978, several power company workers found her body between Whitworth Drive and Division Street in Spokane, Washington. She was partially nude, and it was determined she had been strangled to death. She had been killed about 2 days before being discovered. DNA samples were taken, but this was the 70s, so not a lot could really be done with it. However, in 2006, the samples were tested, and they belonged to an unknown male. There was no match to the DNA in CODIS. In 2020, Othram tested the DNA samples, and in 2023, using genetic genealogy, the DNA was revealed to be a match to Keith D. Lindblom. He is the suspect for raping and killing Krisann. What made this case difficult is that Keith Lindblom died in a fire in 1981, so his DNA was never collected or placed into any DNA database. He did, however, have a violent record. Several years before Krisann's murder, Keith Lindblom raped a 16-year-old girl who was hitchhiking. He was arrested and pleaded guilty to assault. Keith Lindblom was imprisoned and later released on August 7, 1978, approximately 2 months before Krisann Baxter's death. At this point, Krisann's case will be closed, as Keith Lindblom is highly likely to be her killer. Sherman George, also known as the Mohave County John Doe. In January of 1996, several men went into the desert area near Kingman, Arizona, and discovered a shallow grave. At the time, not much was known about the John Doe discovered in the shallow grave, other than he was a black male between 30 to 40 years old and may have stood between 5 feet 10 inches and 6 feet 1 inch. It was determined that he was killed by a gunshot wound to the head. For over 2 decades, the John Doe remained unidentified until DNA testing was completed at Othram. Using genetic genealogy, Mohave County John Doe was revealed to be Sherman George of LA County, California. He previously served in the U.S. Army and often visited the desert with former Army buddies. While in the Army, he was stationed at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. His family last saw him in 1994, but he was never reported missing. Although Sherman has finally been identified, his killer has not. If you have any information that could help his case, please contact the Mohave County Sheriff's Office at 928-753-0753. Suzanne Kjellenberg, also known as Suzanne Jane Doe. In September of 1994, the remains of Jane Doe were discovered by a road crew next to Interstate 10 in Holt, Florida. Her death was likely due to foul play, according to the medical examiner's office. At the time, Jane Doe was thought to be a white female somewhere between the ages of 35 to 55. Along with her remains, several articles of clothing were found. A full-length floral dress and floral print jacket was what she was wearing at the time. The jacket had a drawstring and a zipper, with sequins on the collar and cuffs. Jewelry was also discovered, including a black cord bracelet with colored beads, a silver-colored ring, a heart-shaped silver ring, a charm bracelet but with no charms, a silver band, and a cord necklace with a triangle, square, and 2 circle pendants. She is thought to be the victim of the happy-face killer, Keith Jesperson. Keith Jesperson admitted to murdering a woman and dumping her body in the Holt region. Apparently, at some point, Suzanne Jane Doe started screaming, and in order to silence her, Jesperson pushed his fist into her neck, ultimately killing her. He also mentioned that she called herself Suzanne or Suzette or Susan, and that's how she got her name. He said at the time he had picked her up at a truck stop in Tampa, and at some point between there and Holt, Florida, he killed her. Her DNA was entered into CODIS, but there was no hits at that point. Finally, in 2022, DNA was sent to Othram Labs to be tested. In 2023, it was revealed that Suzanne Jane Doe was Suzanne L. Kjellenberg. Suzanne was born on October 8, 1959, making her 34 years old when she was killed. Krista Martin. On October 2, 1989, 20-year-old Krista Martin was found in her apartment. She was beaten to death. Earlier that day, a friend went to visit her on South Osage Street in Wichita, Kansas, and discovered her. Krista was killed from blunt force trauma to her head. DNA was collected, but there wasn't much investigators could do with it at that time. No suspects were ever identified, and the DNA never matched anyone the police tested, so the case went cold. In 2020, Wichita police sent DNA to Othram in hopes of using genetic genealogy to find a suspect. During 2021, police continued the investigation to gather more evidence. In 2023, Paul Hart was identified as the suspect. Paul Hart died in a car crash in March of 1999. What I've noticed in these cases solved decades later is that the perpetrator usually died before DNA testing became more prolific. This makes it harder for law enforcement to pinpoint them. Since Hart is dead, Krista's case will be considered closed. Teresa Lee Scalf. Teresa Lee Scalf was a 29-year-old nurse who worked at Lakeland Regional Health Medical Center in Polk County, Florida. In October of 1986, she was discovered dead in her home. On October 27, 1986, her son had left their home, and this is when Teresa was murdered. She was viciously attacked and had cuts to her neck and hands. At the scene, blood not belonging to Teresa was collected. The sample was entered into CODIS, but there weren't any matches at the time. It wasn't until 2022 that the Polk County Sheriff's Office sent the blood sample to Othram, where genetic genealogy was used to narrow down leads for a suspect. The suspect in question is Donald Douglas, who is now deceased. He lived in the home directly behind Teresa Scalf. His son provided DNA that showed a child-parent relationship, confirming the blood sample belonged to Donald Douglas. Apparently, Douglas was interviewed during the initial investigation, but there wasn't anything then to confirm or tie him to the crime. He also didn't have any criminal record, so his DNA was never entered into CODIS. He died in 2008 from natural causes. At the time of Teresa's murder, he would have been 33 years old. Hi everyone, Manner of Death here. I just wanted to say thank you so much for subscribing and supporting the channel. We've reached 600. That's incredible. I know I haven't been around a whole lot lately. I've been a little inactive, but I'm going to go ahead and just keep going. You know, I'm still here, and I'm going to keep covering cases, and hopefully we'll see some more getting solved in the new year. Everyone have a happy new year, and I wish you the best in 2024. See you on the next video.